podcast at kcaaradio.com.
KCAA.
And it is election day, the terminus of an election season. And I say that. I'm Mark Westwood, by the way, with a special KCAA NBC pregame, pre-election night show here. I'll be here with Eric Bauman. We'll be discussing the election that is going on right now, that it's been going on since February. Elections now are not just one day where we all gather together on that day and we vote. And then we get, the election results that night that pour in, and we pour over them, and we're surprised and everything else. Now, everything in the state of California is an all-mail ballot. That's right, all-mail. Everybody should have gotten, it's a registered voter, a ballot in the mail. Hopefully you didn't throw it out with the junk mail, that you have it. Hopefully you've returned it. And we kind of look and we see the election night results so far, the election results, the returns, I should say, are kind of low. But first of all, let me welcome a guest who's done more than one or two election coverages with me, who's been on the air at KCAA for a few years now, the former chair of the California Democratic Party and the host of the Uncommon Sense Democrat. To welcome Eric Bauman. It's good to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you, but I got to tell you, I feel extremely uncomfortable. I wasn't introduced as an all-new show.
I can do it for you if you want. The all-new
please.
Uncommon Sense Democrat that's been around for a while. I just make you feel good.
You know what? March is, I forget if it's 3 years or 4 years. I mean, been a long time, Mark, that I've been on KCAA, and you and I have been covering elections that whole time together.
Yep.
And we don't usually do a pre-show, so that makes this a little bit unusual. But there's so much going on. But I want to just say at the start, if you still have your ballot, if you haven't yet voted, there's plenty of time. Please go to your local voting center or go to the registrar's office, drop your ballot off. Make sure if you've mailed it in that it's postmarked by 5 o'clock today. That's critical to make sure that your vote gets counted. And
if you can't find your ballot, ladies and gentlemen, all you have to do is go to the Registrar of Voters in San Bernardino County, for instance, 777 West Rialto Boulevard in San Bernardino. Very easy to find, SBROV. Also online, it's sbcountyelections.com, sbcountyelections.com. In Riverside, it's voteinfo.net, voteinfo.net. The California Secretary of State is sos.ca.gov, sos.ca.gov. You can go there. You can find out. It will guide you where to go. It'll tell you the voting centers. We don't necessarily have precincts anymore, right, Eric?
No. We've really changed up the way things are, and especially in California, 70% of the voting being either by mail or in early voting centers, it really almost becomes irrelevant because people start voting early and they're just voting,
Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen tonight is if you don't have your ballot postmarked by 5 p.m., then you'd have to take it into a voting center by 8 p.m., and you'll vote provisionally. You can vote today even if you're not registered to vote. You will go into the voting center or to the Registrar of Voters in San Bernardino County, any county Registrar of Voters in Riverside, LA, Orange. You'll get a ballot, you'll fill it out, and provided, that's where the word provisional comes, provided you qualify, then they will count your ballot, and you'll register to vote right there. So there's really no excuse not to vote, even if you're not registered to vote. You can go register to vote and vote tonight. It will be counted later on, but you will still be counted provided you are, and your provisional ballot is qualified. So, get out there and vote. There's been a lot of people that have sacrificed their lives. There's been a lot of people who have sacrificed, a lot of stuff for you to be able to have this privilege as a democracy to vote. And so please get out and vote. Now, Eric, I want to review with you just a minute. Did you want to add something? What were you saying?
Yeah, well, what I just wanted to add is when you're looking at the results tonight when they start coming in, remember they're not actually final because ever since we implemented the the vote by mail that allows your ballots to arrive as soon as Friday, there are a lot of late votes counted. Mm-hmm. So while we'll have, probably 90% of the ballots in today, there will be ballots coming in later.
I'll give you a good example of how race changed. It was the Christy Holstage guy and the guy, Republican, I can never remember his name, and he's currently an assembly member, because he won. Greg Wallace, out in the 47th Assembly District. Christy Holstage was the mayor of Palm Springs. And Greg Wallace, who they didn't expect to win, and they kept counting the votes. And at one point, Christy Holstage was predicted the winner. On election night, she was actually predicted to be the winner. And by December, she had lost by just 85 votes. She lost that race by 85 votes. That was a painful one.
I'll tell you, going back quite a number of years, but in Los Angeles, Congresswoman Jane Harman lost her election on Election Day, and it was announced that she had lost. But her campaign consultant, a woman who lives half-time in Palm Springs, Sue Burnside, had this fabulous vote-by-mail program. And by the time they counted those vote-by-mail ballots, it flipped it around, and Jane Harman won the race. Mm-hmm. So she had been in Congress. She stepped out of Congress to run for governor. She lost the race for governor, and this was her attempt to return, which, in fact, she did do.
Mm-hmm. So, well, yeah, that's the way that goes. And, we've covered a lot of elections, and we know this. And so this is why tonight I decided for the very first time in 11 years since I've been general manager and 3 years before that I was here at KCAA, not to do an election night show because it's so different this time with the vote by mail. We'll have a release of the results of a lot of the ballots that have been counted by probably 8:15, 8:20, and then we might not see anything else at all that night tonight, or maybe around 11 o'clock. It's very anticlimactic, and like I said, and like you've just said, and we've both established, the results just aren't the results like they were on election night before because of the way the ballots are counted. And so, and by the way, just so you feel comfortable about your ballot, and there's no cheating going on. All ballots have a distinctive encoding barcode on them. Can't be forged, and it's assigned to you as a voter. You sign your ballot, you return it, and like I returned my ballot about 3 weeks ago, and I got, as soon as I put it in the mail the next morning, the post office said we have it, and we're going to ship it to the Registrar of Voters. And then I got a text mail when I got it. It was received the Registrar of Voters, and now I'll get a text mail that my ballot has been counted tonight. And then the last election when they did it, and I went through all this last election. They texted me where my ballot was being stored, in what room under the lock and key of the Registrar of Voters. So it's totally secure, totally safe, provides a great paper trail. So, there's no hanky-panky. There's not been a lot of election cheating. So,
But what has happened, and particularly this is a problem for Republicans, and not that I'm, care to speak for the Republicans, but originally, the Republicans were the ones who knew how to use vote by mail. Mm-hmm. And Democrats were the ones who were hesitant. And then Democrats started using it and took it over. And Republicans kind of backed away from it a bit. But when Trump became president and started raving about how his election was being stolen with vote by mail, it has become increasingly hard for Republicans to win those elections because they're voters who are not going to get up and
drive to the polls and go into the polls.
Drive to the polls, exactly. Are no longer comfortable using vote by mail or early voting because Trump tells them that's how all the theft occurs.
So he suppressed his own vote. And, here's the deal. It was all by mail. It was very secure last time. They couldn't, as much as they accuse it and say, that somehow it was cheated, and I always say this, and people kind of go, yeah, you're right. If the Democrats would have cheated in the presidential election and all of those ballots and all those offices and everything were on the same ballot, they would have cheated on all the down-ticket races, and we wouldn't have had a Mitch McConnell or a Lindsey Graham or anybody like that elected. And they were elected in the same election in 2020 as Joe Biden. So,
this is, but Mark, you just hit on something very important. Nobody pays attention. Nobody recognizes the fact that if you say, oh, well, the ballots were corrupted in, San Bernardino County in order to hurt Donald Trump, well, then they were corrupted against every Republican.
Right. And they don't even talk about that.
And, while I'm definitely a partisan Democrat by far, I want people to vote. I want their vote to be counted. I want them to be included, whether I agree with who their choices are or not. I want people. The number one civic responsibility we have, and the number one civic right that we have, is to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, simultaneous to all this other nonsense is the fact that we have stopped teaching civics in school. So kids don't learn the importance of their participation in the electoral process. When I was a kid growing up in New York, Election Day was made a holiday. Almost every one of us went to the polls, which, by the way, were almost exclusively in the schools. We went to the polls with our parents. We could go into the booth with them and watch how they voted. So we learned about the process, and we talked about how important it was, and we learned about it in school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we don't do that anymore. And it's not just here in California, by the way. It's all across the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a real big problem. And they don't realize the importance of it. I like to do it like this. I ask them a question. If you had to steal 6 votes to win an election, or if you had to steal 1 million votes, which do you think would be easier? And I call this weight of your ballot. By you voting and everybody else voting, it adds that weight to the ballot. And if you have to move 1 million ballots, as opposed to if this was going on, and it's not, if you had to move 1 million votes as opposed to 6 votes, it would be easy to move 6 votes. It's not so easy to move 1 million votes. And so that's why everybody needs to vote. It's by the sheer weight of your ballot and your voice and everybody together, no matter what it is. Now, I want to... Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, and this year, I'm sure we'll spend at least a few minutes talking about what's going on nationally, but this year in California, we have something we really haven't seen in more than 30 years, which is we have an open Senate seat that's being contested.
And let me get to that in just a minute, because that's on my plan. But before we roll into that, I just wanted to say, because we were kind of reminiscing a little bit at the beginning of the show, and I wanted to say, this is an interesting thing between me and Eric. We share one thing together that I'll never forget, and that was that we were doing a combined show on January 6th with no idea what was about to happen and go down.
Yeah.
We were live together on the air when the first footage started to come through of what was going on in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And, we were trying to, interpret it, what was going on. We didn't know what was going on. Was it just a protest gone wild? Was it violent? Were they breaking things? And all of the stuff that just came through. It was an amazing period, we went on from the hour show on, we went on probably about another three and a half hours.
Yeah, I was going to say we were on at least 3 hours that night.
Right. And it was a historical time here at KCAA and for, of course, for the nation and everything else. And, and
wasn't
amazing.
That pastor on with us, too?
Yes.
Maybe.
Your friend, Pastor, it was John.
No,
John Reed. Pastor John
Right.
Reed, yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, he was on too. It was an amazing time, and what the amount of what happened in that night wound up being a congressional committee investigation that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, was on national television for weeks and weeks, and never did they ever produce one shred of evidence, by the way, that there was any cheating going on. They referred to cheating in Pennsylvania. And you know what the cheating in Pennsylvania was, folks? Was that we were using mail-in ballots.
Well, no, and the only cheating they found was Republicans were cheating.
That was their basis, yeah. That was their basis for there's cheating going on. It was that during a pandemic, we used mail-in ballots, which everybody used, and there was no cheating, and there was the safest, most secure election ever, yet they still go on about, January 6th. And at the Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC's convention last week, some pastor got up and a key opening speech said, we're here to overthrow democracy and finish what we started on January 6th. And I thought, wow, those are just incredible words, incredible. I just could not believe my eyes. I couldn't believe my ears. I had to replay it several times. Like, did he actually say overthrow our democracy? Is this what the Republican Party and the radicals have become? And the answer is yes. Yeah.
Well, my friends who are Republicans, and including those that are conservatives, they think this stuff is such hooey. It's hard for me to think of adjectives like hooey.
I know, because you use more explicative terms, like I do too.
Yeah.
And it's like, very creative.
President Biden would call it malarkey. I mean, when did you ever hear this malarkey before? I mean, it's ridiculous. But when we talk about the California elections, as I know we're going to slide into in a minute, I want to make sure we talk about one set of races that are on our ballots that are local, that nobody understands and nobody knows about, and therefore they often don't vote for. And those are the county central committee votes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So make a note on your paper that we add that to our agenda.
Okay, I will try my level best to do that. We have a lot to cover tonight, and this evening in about 35 minutes. But let's transition to covering it. I don't know which to start first. We should start at the top with the presidential races and do a recap of that, and then come back after the break and go into the local races. I think that's what we're going to do. Because the presidential one is the most glamorous, but we can really cover that and what's been covered over the national news in about 5 to 6, 7 minutes here. So where do we start?
Here's what I would say. There is a mythology that if you listen to the news, that, for example, says, well, Donald Trump can sew up the Republican nomination tonight. No, he cannot. He will be a couple of hundred delegates short. Yeah, I couldn't think of the word for a second. He will be a couple of hundred delegates short. Now, the fact is nobody will be able to catch him. Nikki Haley will not be able to catch him. But to say he has it sewn up is not true.
It's not factual. Yeah.
And the other thing they do is they'll say, well, he'll have won the nomination. No, he won't have won the nomination until he goes to the Republican National Convention, and they bestow it upon him.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
And I want people to think here. This is not a game, because when he does sew up the nomination, and he becomes a Republican nominee, and maybe you're going to vote for him just for the fun of it because you know he's not going to be able to win. Maybe that's what you're thinking. Think about this, folks. If he becomes a Republican nominee for President of the United States, he gets one thing that he hasn't been getting a lot of, and that's security briefings. And that's scary because that's the tradition, the protocol for the Republican or the opposing party nominee to get security briefings. So he will have, the information the President of the United States has, and we already know he's shared that with the wrong people before in Iraq. We know that he's taken paperwork and scattered it around and not kept it secure. He's that's very, very scary. He is not going to wrap up the nomination tonight. You were very, very correct. This twice impeached, 4 times criminally indicted, misogynistic, narcissistic.
91 felonies.
91 felonies. And just lost a huge civil case in New York, $265 million. He's been fined, found guilty on that. Very much so. I'm just trying to figure out how much do we lower our standards, people, to vote for this guy. People are voting not thinking. They're voting because maybe they're angry or feeling disenfranchised or they feel like they're being rebellious. But, let's stop and think about this.
And I want to say, I know a lot of Democrats are disappointed in the ruling on the use of the 14th Amendment. But I want to just the 14th Amendment is the amendment. The third section of the 14th Amendment says that any officer anybody who holds office or has held office
takes the oath, yeah,
who commits insurrection is no longer eligible to run for office. But the reason that the ruling was unanimous, the liberals, even though they had a separate opinion, the liberals joined the conservatives is because if you had, for example, Michigan say, well, Trump can't be on the ballot here, well, then tomorrow Florida could vote to say, well, Biden can't be on the ballot here.
I think the decision was healthy. I didn't like it, but I think I agree with you. The decision was healthy for the United States. It was the right thing to do. Let's get them on the ballot. Let's people vote them up or down or whatever. But don't keep them off the ballot because it would have caused another reason for insurrections all over the United States. And we can't have that. But moving on from that, Trump and these polls and what the conservative media, and I say the conservative media, the corporate-owned media like Fox, and I had to say it, NBC Universal and CBS and Sony and all these very rich corporations want out of this election is the one thing that they get. They used to say money is the mother's milk of elections. Well, it is the honey, the wine, the Chardonnay of media companies. They want that big money. And with Trump in the race, being able to dump a bunch of money, like he spent $1,243 per caucus delegate in Iowa. That's a lot of money, and that's just for that. And then you got the outside, the restaurants, everybody else. They want this to be a race, and so they're kind of wishing it, and they're giving these really kind of skewed polls that say, that is. And then, they're giving him, sunshine kind of coverage, and while they're saying, Biden is not up to the mark and everything else, and it's totally untrue.
Well, no, but nobody wants to talk about, and this has been a real problem. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that Trump mixes up the names of countries, that he mixed up Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, he's much farther gone. I mean, the truth is he's much farther gone than Biden is for certain.
Oh, yeah. He was campaigning the other night against Obama. Instead of mentioning Biden's name as the current president of the United States, Obama.
Obama's been out of office for 8 years at least. But here's something else I want to say about the polls, and this is very important. Because of there's an expression in the media: if it bleeds, it leads. And so the New York Times puts on the front page of their paper in a big banner headline that Trump leads Biden by, 4 points, I think, in their latest poll. The next day, in a much smaller article, it says, but among likely voters, Biden leads Trump by 2. And this is something that I want people, if they're reading a poll, to look and see, are they polling likely voters or are they polling all voters? Because the reality is not more than 40, even in a presidential years, not more than 40, 45% are going to vote. And so when you look at those polls, look and see, usually it's at the end of the article, it'll say, they polled 1,000 registered voters or 1,000 likely voters. The polls that are more likely to be accurate are likely voters. But once a month on my show, I have political consultant Larry Levine, who's been a consultant for over 50 years, and pollster Gene Bregman, who's been a pollster for 40 years. And we talk about this stuff all the time because people get these impressions. And unfortunately, what happens is they get baked in. When day after day you turn on the TV and it says, well, in this poll or that poll, President Biden is, 5 points down, he's 4 points down. But then when you look at the Quinnipiac poll, he's ahead. What's the difference? Quinnipiac is now polling likely voters.
Yeah.
And that's something you want to watch for. But, just in trying to keep our timing, make sure we have some time to talk about California stuff, it is 3:33.
Right. We're going to go to break here in just a second. And I want to interrupt you here because I just want to say some positive things about Joe Biden. I want to do just a kind of a quick laundry list for people. And, of course, we're talking with Eric Bauman, who's the host of the Uncommon Sense Democrat, the new Uncommon Sense Democrat. And we're talking about the election day today. The day is the election deadline. Get your mail-in ballots. Before we go to break, though, real quick, I'm going to do some bullet points. We'll come back. We'll talk just a little bit more about that, and then we'll go into what I call the state races and the local races and the Senate race here. But some of the Biden achievements. First of all, if he did nothing more than to bring us out of the pandemic and get us inoculated and get us out of that terrible shutdown and our schools back open. Biden did that, and he did it very well, and he did it very efficiently. Look back at where we were before with the frozen food trucks with the bodies in them as being used as morgues all over the place, and Trump was having chaotic news conferences and suggesting bleach. There's a huge difference. So just for that, he should be reelected.
But if you remember, Trump used to say, like every other week, this is going to be infrastructure week. Well, there never was any infrastructure week. The entire time Trump was president, Joe Biden passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and Democrats and Republicans voted for it. And this is something he doesn't get credit for. The fact that he has this capacity to bring Democrats and Republicans together to vote.
It really is.
Just as he did what no president has done in many, many years. He pulled all of Europe, all of NATO together to stand up for Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And these are incredibly important.
Absolutely.
Accomplishments. Yeah, I couldn't think of the word for a second, but
let me get through these bullet points real quick because we got to go to the break. Real quick, job growth: 300,000 plus new jobs in just the last quarter alone. The 8th quarter in a row of job growth, and 3.4% unemployment rates down. 3.4%. We haven't had that since 1960. The infrastructure you just mentioned, the infrastructure bill, the economy, the GDP, the wage growth, the the expanded overtime guarantee, which creates overtime for 3.6 million people and putting more money into their pockets for time and a half. Established the Office of Gun Violence Prosecution and Prevention. Renewable energy. He's put all kinds of money into renewable energy. And, he's changed, by the way, and we're going to get back to that some other time, the way the Electoral College certifies the votes. That big debacle that happened on January 6th, it's now defined as the vice presidential's role is only ministerial. So there can't be another January 6th, and there won't be another January 6th if, by chance, he doesn't get elected or, whatever happens. That will be carried out the way it should be, and the president won't be sitting in the White House not calling the National Guard. The president will call in the National Guard and the military troops and the police in right away when they start rushing the Capitol, if they were to do that, if they were foolish enough to do that. This is the difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, and just using the pandemic and the way the pandemic was handled, think about that. He had a scandal every day. Trump had a scandal every day on the news. And so, those are some of the things that the reason why, if you can vote for Biden, you should.
Well, there's one more thing I want to add that is really critically important. Over 2 million additional people have been added to the ranks of the the insured who have health insurance because of President Biden's expansion of the Affordable Care Act.
Absolutely right. So we're going to go to a break right now. I got to cut you off. We got to go to the break, do this couple of things here, and we're going to come back because we're only going to have about maybe 20 minutes to talk about the local races and the state races. This is what always happens to us, Eric, right? It's great having you on. Eric Bauman, Mark Westwood, we'll be right back right after this on KCAA 1050 AM and 106.5 FM. See you in a minute, Eric.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
This is an NBC News Radio Super Tuesday special report. Today is the biggest day of the 2024 presidential primary season. Super Tuesday will award over a third of the total delegates possible for the Democratic and Republican presidential hopefuls from over a dozen states. Reports say former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley may end her GOP campaign with a poor showing. Haley held a rally last night in Fort Worth, Texas, saying the two frontrunners are out of touch.
You can't be like Joe Biden where you put your head in the sand, and you can't be like Donald Trump where you just walk away from everybody and think you're going to be okay.
Haley has hopes of Democrats making the switch in a protest against Donald Trump. The number of delegates on the table will be big boost for the winners. Former President Trump is the favored frontrunner. This has been an NBC News Radio Super Tuesday special report. I'm Brian Shook.
This is KCAA.
KCAA 1050 AM 106.5 FM. Mark Westwood along with Eric Bauman, and we are covering the local races. This is the pregame, pre-election, night, day, period, whatever you want to call it, election show here. Welcome back, Eric. As we continue on now, let's just dive right into these state races. And, of course, the most important being the United States Senate race. There's only two senators from the state, each state. This will control probably the balance of power in the Senate, which is not very big difference between the Senate and so we've got in the race, we have Steve Garvey, who's a Republican. We have three Democrats, Adam Schiff, Barbara Lee, and now I'm going to...
Katie Porter.
Katie Porter. Oh, gosh, I can't believe I forgot Katie Porter. Those are the Democratic choices. So, Eric, I will let you fire first. Go ahead.
Well, so Adam Schiff has been in the lead from the get-go on this. He's raised significantly more money than any of the other candidates, and he's chosen an interesting advertising strategy. He's run advertisements against Steve Garvey, the former first baseman for the Dodgers and I forget it was the Padres I think it was the Padres. And in it, his ads all say he voted twice for Biden. Voted twice for Trump.
Garvey voted twice for Trump. Yes.
And the idea is to energize Republicans to come out and vote for Garvey, therefore pushing Garvey into either second place or, in the one recent poll, first place. Because in a general election, if it's Schiff versus Garvey, Schiff is going to wipe the floor with him.
Yeah, it won't be
This is
first
not
place.
this is not like the days of Arnold Schwarzenegger, because Arnold Schwarzenegger was a big star and he got votes for other reasons that had nothing to do with the fact that he was a Republican.
So my prediction for this race, okay?
Go.
My prediction for this race is just simply this. Adam Schiff will be at the top. He will be at the top. People, you have two things you can vote for. To fill out the remaining term of Dianne, the late Dianne Feinstein, who passed away, Senator Feinstein, and then you have the full term. And from what I've gathered and talked to people and kind of polled and surveyed myself, everybody thinks Adam Schiff, like you said, is above, far and above, head and shoulders, the best choice and the most funded and will win. So I think the real nail-biter won't be for the first place. We'll know that it'll be Adam Schiff. The nail-biter will be for the second place. And that'll be between, I believe, Katie Porter and Steve Garvey.
I think you're 100% right. And Barbara Lee, who's a wonderful person, but she's certainly as far left as anybody could be. She's the only member of Congress who voted against the invasion of, I think it was Iraq, after the 9/11.
I have no qualms with Barbara Lee. She's a great lady. She makes the right decisions. Just doesn't have the potential to become a United States senator. And Katie Porter's a little fresh yet and needs to really work a little longer to become a United States senator. Like I said, that's the upper house, and there's not very many senators. There's I think 104 senators in the whole chamber.
100.
Is this 100? Just two per that?
100, two per state.
Two per state? That's
yeah,
all?
That's
We
it.
don't get any other senators for anything else? Okay.
No.
So my bad on that one. But it's very small. It's a very elite group of people when we have 370 million people in the United States. So, that is a very powerful position. And that's why we see so many senators being elected as president later on in their lives. So, this is an important race.
Well, and it serves a critical function. I mean, right now Joe Biden has nominated more federal judges by almost twice than Donald Trump did. And because the majority leader, Chuck Schumer, has pushed them through, I mean, you don't hear anybody talk about it, but he's really remade the federal judiciary in that way. And the thing is, his appointments have been the most diverse group of judges ever. I mean, remember, this is the president who appointed an African-American woman to the United States Supreme Court, who appointed an African-American woman to the second most important court in the nation, which is the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. He has appointed everybody from Native Americans to openly LGBT
Yes, exactly.
people.
It's important because of judicial appointments. A good example, folks, of why I say this, if you happen to have a fountain pen there, pick it up, take the fountain pen, and just point it down, straight down on the paper, and pick it up. And you'll see a little dot on the paper left by the ink. That little dot is 8.5 times bigger than an embryo. Yet we have people in judicial positions saying that embryo has a soul and a life and it should be guarded. And, this is where we get embryos are eggs, too, from Nikki Haley, people who don't understand the science of this whole thing. And, it's amazing what we see coming down our way, and the radicalism is just the beginning if we let the wrong people get in office. And Steve Garvey is nothing more than a baseball player who decided he wanted a career in politics and has never held a political office before. Not school board.
No, and he's wanted to have a political office for 30 years.
Right.
And he thought this was, this open Senate seat, he thought this was the time. The reality is he's run a pretty horrible campaign, to be frank.
Well, he thought he was going to Arnold Schwarzenegger everybody and be the, Donald Trump, be the celebrity. People are tired of celebrity politicians because they realize what they get. And in California, by the way, with only 23 Republicans in all of Sacramento running around, or 27 or something like that, very limited number, no, constitutional offices, people vote Democrat because they're smart. But
right.
That, vote tonight. Of course, it's the election night, and it's important that you fill that ballot out and that you vote for your choice. But just realize that Senate race is very, very important to the outcome of the United States.
And as they say, make sure when you vote your ballot, you vote it from the top to the bottom, meaning vote for your state Senate candidate, vote for your assembly candidate, vote for your judicial candidates, and vote for your county central committee candidates, which hopefully we're going to have a few minutes to talk about because it's very important.
Yeah, and we may have to come back on that, but we'll try. So we've gotten kind of through the United States Senate race and why it's so important, because it does affect the affect the United States as a whole and the balance of power in the Senate, and we really don't want that to go the other way. Now let's get to some local races here real quick. And again, you can find all this information out and who to vote for and where you're going to vote and how you're going to vote if you don't have your ballot for some reason at sbcountyelections.com, sbcountyelections.com, or voteinfo.net in Riverside County, or sos.ca.gov, sos.ca.gov. I'm sure there's a website in Los Angeles as well, Eric. I don't know if you know it verbatim.
LAvote.net.
LAvote.net. LAvote.net. And each county has a county registrar of voters, and you need to go to those and find those and look those out. So let's look at some local races here. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a couple minutes to start in San Bernardino County, and then we'll go from there without objection. In the local races, a very interesting one. We have an openly gay man, a former prosecutor, terrorist prosecutor, Will Rollins, in the 41st, running against Ken Calvert. You familiar with this race, Eric?
Yeah, I thought it was in Riverside, though.
Riverside
yes,
County, it is. You're right, it is in Riverside, but yeah. I run the Yucaipa Calamasa Democratic Club, so I get a little bit, over the county line there. So that's the one that doesn't have an effect right nearby. So, yes, let's talk about Will Rollins versus Ken Calvert real quick.
Well, so first of all, Ken Calvert, they used to call him Ken Pervert because some number of years ago he was caught in his car with a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when he was running against now Congressman Mark Takano.
Right.
And so his response to it was to try to out Mark Takano, who in those days wasn't totally out of the closet. Well, Calvert has done nothing except for be a classic Republican lackey.
And Will Rollins got really close in that race the last time around. That was one of those nail biter. It could have been Congressman Rollins really easily, and he was running against this multi-time incumbent Ken Calvert. So Will Rollins in the 41st. It's going to be a tough one to predict. I really do.
And look, as it goes, and I don't want to belabor this, but it's a very important. Will Rollins is sharp as a tack. He has, great law and order,
yeah,
credentials,
mm-hmm.
And I think he'll be a great congressman.
Very qualified and very magnanimous, Will Rollins. In the 23rd Congressional District, and this is one that crosses Riverside and San Bernardino County lines as well, Derek Marshall and Jay Obernolte. Jay Obernolte, of course, being the big-time Trumper, votes lockstep, doesn't represent his area as much as he just represents his party first. And Derek Marshall being a very progressive, candidate as well in the 23rd Congressional District, campaigning very, very hard, very, very organized, was a Bernie field organizer in Nevada, very, very successful, and a very much community activist, Derek Marshall. Then coming down into the 47th Assembly District, we talked about this before, Christy Holstage. This is the current Assembly member, Greg Wallace, who, has done such accomplishments as being on the Sports and Tourism Committee up in Sacramento. Doesn't get very much respect up there. They didn't expect to see him coming, and only won by 85 votes, and is in a very, that district includes Palm Springs, of which Christie was the mayor of. The mayor of, and also which she's now a city council person, is a lawyer, also sharp as a tack, a mother, a wife. Christie is also bisexual, and she's a member of that Palm Springs City Council that's entirely lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, which brings me to the next candidate, which is the first openly transgender candidate and current mayor of not current mayor of Palm Springs, but was mayor of Palm Springs, and is a city council member, Lisa Middleton. Met Lisa for the first time, a very impressive person, very smart as well, and she's running in Senate District 19. And been endorsed by the California Federation of Labor and the AFL-CIO, former mayor of Palm Springs, and a wife of a retired nurse. I thought you might like that as well if you didn't know that little bit of information, since you are all a nurse that's currently in practice. So
I was a nurse, am a nurse, and will always be a nurse. It's one of those things, you get it in your blood, you can't get rid of it.
And one more candidate I want to talk about before I turn it over to you for the last 5 minutes or so, and that is a guy named Graham Smith. Very, very smart financial planner, is running for 3rd District County Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County. We need to put a Democrat to balance that all-Republican County District Board of Supervisors almost. And he's running against one Don Rowe, who is pretty much proven that she's very ineffective, very unaware of her surroundings, was kind of patted on the back and said after the current supervisor that was there made Congress that you're going to be Congress in the supervisor, and then she won her next race. But she's great at spending a lot of money and not knowing what it's being spent on. She's great at not reacting. Like, for instance, the reason Graham's running in the first place is, when they had that snowmageddon up in the mountains, and there was 10 feet worth of snow, and then the county supervisors just didn't react, and it was in her district, square in her district, and she didn't react. They finally had to get up and protest. The mountain community residents had to get up and protest to get rescued out of the snow. That's why Graham Smith is running. He's sharp. He's smart. He's also good looking. He's also a member of the community, and I very much endorsed Graham Smith as well. So those are my candidates that I voted for, and I will now turn it over to you. 4 minutes, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I wish we could extend the half an hour, but I understand we have a show right behind us that we can't.
We can't, yeah.
We can't push. Well, I want to talk just for a minute about county central committees. Every county in California, in fact, most counties across the country, but every county in California has what's called the County Central Committee. Mark was the vice chair of the San Bernardino County Central Committee, and if you listen to my show tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I'm having the former chair of the San Bernardino County Central Committee on. So these are the folks who set the local Democratic Party policy and who do the endorsements in all the local races, meaning city councils, boards of supervisors, judges, and the like. And what happens is because people don't know what it is, they don't vote for them. And it's one of those races that remains a partisan race, even in the open primary that we have. And it's very important to take the time and get a reference as to who you should vote for. in those races because it makes a big difference in who all gets the party's endorsements, get to use the party's name.
Yeah, it is very important.
I wanted to mention that we don't have. We probably have about a minute, or 2 minutes, I suppose. There has been a fight brewing in Arizona for the United States Senate race, where Kyrsten Sinema, the former Democrat, who became an independent and became quite difficult, dropped out today. So now it'll be Democrat Ruben Gallego against the Republican Kari Lake, who's a total Trump psycho. So I wanted to mention that one just for people to be able to follow.
That will be definitely.
And one other person to keep your eye on is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is as crazy as a loon, but people flock to him in great part because of his name, or because he's a big anti-vaxxer, and so many anti-vaxxers flock to him because he's kind of a leader in the anti-vax movement. So just keep your eye on him, watch out for him. He's not what he claims to be. Okay,
I got to cut you.
Okay.
I got to cut you,
That's
unfortunately,
fine.
And I thank you, Eric Bowen, for being on here. Eric Bowen will be on tomorrow, the Uncommon Sense Democrat with Chris Robles, I believe I just heard. And, I wish I could talk about what I call the S show in San Bernardino. Also, the live circus where 18 people running for 3 city council seats, some who have been recalled, some who have lost, some who have had to resign, some have been subject of FBI investigations, some who have been DQ'd. I got to tell you, it is really an S show over in San Bernardino, and I can't say the word on the air. But, please, if you're in San Bernardino, the reason it always is because you people don't vote. Get out and vote. It's simple. Go vote. People are getting elected with like 1,000 votes or less, Eric. It's just ridiculous. Ridiculous. They don't vote in San Bernardino. So please vote. And today is Election Day. You can vote right up till you can get it postmarked by 5 p.m. Get your ballot in. Go to a post office. Go to a voting center. Get it Uber or whatever you need to vote. It's very, very important, especially for all these races, especially for San Bernardino, especially for the U.S. Senate race and all the glamorous races. And please vote yes on Prop 1, by the way. Please vote yes on Prop 1. I'm Mark Westwood along with Eric Bauman. We are just about out of time. I wish we had more. Eric, we'll see you tomorrow. You'll see me again on Thursday. We'll be talking about all this.
And Mark, you can join my show at 3:30.
Okay. Sounds
good.
When
I have Chris.
This has been a special election coverage here on Election Day on NBC, KCAA, 1050 AM and 106.5 FM. We'll see you tomorrow.